Hey, Rebel Rouser. I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7. We're at episode number 1690 today. Thank you so much for joining me for it. Thank you so much for subscribing to the show, if you're subscribing to it, wherever you happen to be catching it. And also, thank you so much to all of our patrons who support this daily dose of Star Wars joy for your entertainment at patreon.com/SW7x7. So today we've got a Resistance briefing on tap. We are looking at the core problem, which is episode 17 from season 1 of Star Wars Resistance. And we are getting much closer to the events of The Force Awakens in this episode. In fact, the whole episode starts off with Poe Dameron arriving. And I guess I should tell you right off the top that this is a spoiler-filled podcast, and so if you do not want to dig into the details of the core problem with me until you've seen the episode, then hey, save this one for a later date. But if you're good with me diving right in, then let's just do it. It was already something that was revealed in the tagline for the episode, or for the log line for the episodes, I should say. So Poe Dameron being in this episode, not a surprise. All right, so I'm good on my spoiler warning situation here. So Poe shows up, and what he tells Kaz is that he needs to do a droid swap because he needs BB-8 for a mission. General Leia Organa is sending him to Jakku tomorrow, according to this. And, one thing we don't necessarily know is whether he's going back to Dakar from here, and then whether he's leaving the following day to go to Jakku from Dakar, and how long it takes to get from Dakar to Jakku and all that stuff. So we're not necessarily in an episode of Star Wars Resistance that takes place the day before the start of The Force Awakens, but it's pretty darn close. It might well be the next day, but for sure it's within the same week. It has to be at least that much. And BB-8 has officially made his transfer back to Poe Dameron's tender ministrations, and now CB-23 is going to be hanging out with Kaz, which of course raises some suspicion with Tam, wondering, what is this new droid? And he gets to disappear all the time, Kaz does, without any explanation or anything like that. And all Yeager will say is, yeah, you wouldn't understand. And she's not happy about that at all. Just, you're not even giving me a chance to understand, basically, is where she's coming from. And that dam is going to get broken soon enough, probably when the First Order finally makes their big move and starts, taking over stuff, which Kaz has an interesting theory about the First Order and their desire of the Colossus. It may be that they're not actually after the Colossus itself. It might be more that they want to keep the Colossus out of the hands of the Resistance. Meanwhile, as far as Resistance itself goes, well, the First Order has clamped down on communications, and we see Kaz trying to build a pirate radio, basically, which, comically awry. That's all you really need to know about that. It just goes comically awry. And so Poe shows up on the platform, and it's a mystery as to how he got on there without being noticed by the First Order. And to get off the platform, they have to sneak a ride on a cargo ship with Team Fireball's ship. And Poe, this is a scene where in the mid-season trailer where you got to see him hanging on the outside of a cockpit, well, it was because he was hitching a ride that way to get to where his X-Wing fighter was being autopiloted by CB-23, apparently well outside the range of First Order tracking. And I think this is a situation where we are encouraged not to ask too much about the details of how exactly Poe managed to slip by the First Order. But there is a bit of odd activity happening in a nearby system that Poe says, well, Leia doesn't like surprises, so let's go check it out. And so this is a full set of scenes that we saw in the mid-season trailer where the two of them were on a mission together to investigate some planetoid that looked like it had been utterly decimated, and all these other moons and celestial objects broken up. And when they're passing through there, they also note that there's no sun to be found anywhere as well. So you get the idea that, at least at first, that Starkiller base testing might have been happening here, because there's a note about the fact that if they were mining, then they kind of left things in a state where they weren't mined completely. But they did find one planetoid that seemed to be mined completely, and it just had one circular hole bored down through the center of the celestial body and out the other side, and somehow there was a gravity well in that thing too, which causes its own share of problems. But basically, what you're supposed to think when you're looking at it is that it looks like a Starkiller base that doesn't work anymore or went awry, or that something else has happened, because or maybe this is actually the thing that they had the Starkiller weapon installed in initially, and then they removed it and transported it to wherever Starkiller base actually is. But hard to say for sure. There's only really just that hole tunneled through it. There's no trench that goes along the the equator of the planet either. So maybe it's not a perfect logistical situation where there's overlap of one planetoid versus the other with this Starkiller business. But be that as it may, it's definitely meant to evoke Starkiller and the fact that they were working on something in this portion of the unknown regions. And unfortunately, they set off a probe droid, which is nothing like anything Poe has seen before. They managed to destroy the probe droid, but not before it's been able to send a signal out to the First Order, and Major Von Rag shows up with some ships in support. And of course, nothing goes the way Von Rag wants. In fact, all of his wingmen get killed, and it looks like he could have possibly been killed in the going back through the gravity well of that planet that got hollowed out by the First Order. But he's going to survive it. I mean, that's just how these TV shows go. We haven't seen the ship explode, so there's no reason you can assume that even though he was lost in the middle of this thing, you can't assume that he's dead. And that is just about everything that you need to know about the core problem, unless you want to count this other one last thing, and I'll tell you about that in a second. First, though, I do just have to remind you to subscribe to the show if you're not doing so already. And also, if you are enjoying the show and feel it's worth getting me a cup of coffee or something stronger every month, then by all means, check out the community at patreon.com/SW7x7. So that last other thing has to do with the way that Poe and Kaz exchange droids. And this was also something that was in the mid-season trailer as well, where you see BB-8 and CB-23 flying through space, kind of crossing paths and waving at each other in their own little, appendage ways as they go by. And so at the time I saw it in the mid-season trailer, I have to say, I thought, oh my gosh, this is really bizarre scene. I wonder if something bad is happening to these droids, or whoever they were with, that they're flying through space like this. Well, no, that was actually the maneuver as intended to get the two of them to jump between the cockpits of the Fireball and of Poe Dameron's X-Wing. So that's how that particular scene shook out from the mid-season trailer. And that is going to do it for today's episode of the show. Thank you so much for joining me for this Resistance briefing on episode 17 of season 1 of Star Wars Resistance. And as always, may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
This podcast is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox. It is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other related Star Wars items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2019 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.